JOUR 850. Criminal Confessions as Literature. 2 credits. In this 4-week summer session, Whittington program students will analyze lengthy real-world pieces of spontaneous confession from American convicts imprisoned between 1968 and 2022. In studying these prose-like, intensely personal histories on the page, and the paranoia and delusions some of the subjects reveal, students will examine the ethics and boundaries of publishing controversial nonfiction. Texts to be studied include the East Lansing Strangler Manifesto, the police confessions of Eliza G. Norris, the sentencing protests of serial murderer Mark Linson Libby, and the extraordinary statement of the recently convicted Randall Shiggis.
My name is Randall Shiggis. My stage name since I turned 40 is Randy Schilling. 4 hours ago, in the middle of the night, my sister called me from the side of Galleon Road and told me about sitting in soup. I've been at stupider auditions, but I never did get the story of why they made her sit in soup. I guess there's no reason that would really make sense. Audrey told me, and I could barely hear her, that she was thumbing back to Mom and Dad's all the way to Salton Sea. Said she was never coming back to this stupid town. Didn't seem to care that I couldn't possibly afford the rent. She was doing that thing she always did, looking at the glass half empty because neither one of us had gotten an acting job in all the years we'd been trying. She said it was because we sucked. But I don't know. Mom and Dad never told us we sucked, and they were movie stars in the 70s. Well, TV movie stars. But Audrey was just uncooperative. I mean, it's the industry. They tell you to sit in soup, you sit in soup. You sit in hot fudge. You sit in the Third Reich if they tell you to. It's called building a resume. It's called money. She kept breaking up over the phone because all either of us have is a discount thing. She said, "You've got to get out of there." I thought she meant because I'd get evicted, so I told her maybe I'd ask Moped to move in, but she said it wasn't that. It was that the laundry was out of control now. As if I didn't know that. She'd promised me on Tuesday that we were just about to get to it. I was actually kind of getting geared up for it. But now, she said, we were lying to ourselves. We'd let it get too far out of hand. It was dangerous now. Dangerous. That was just a myth, I said. Just throw some things in a bag and come east, she said. Don't even open that door. But Mom and Dad are like 90 now. I hung up on her. She was just trying to scare me. Dangerous. She made me so mad. Just last week, she promised to help me memorize Al Pacino's God monologue from The Devil's Advocate for class. And here she was trying to hitchhike 150 miles and eating up my phone minutes complaining about her career. Like I hadn't had to dress up as a plunger twice for 2 different commercial tryouts in 2019. The second time, they didn't even have a costume for me. I had to make one myself. She killed our dream just like that. I couldn't get back to sleep. That thing about the laundry. It was just, other errands always kept popping up, and it got depressing after a while just thinking about it. And she kept throwing hers into the bin, and we started mixing, and the laundromat's all the way over on 13th, and they closed for a week because of a fire, and eventually we fell so far behind that we didn't know what to do. I got up off the futon and went into the bathroom, turned on the light. I guess we should have taken action as soon as we couldn't get to the sink anymore because we had so many dirty clothes on it. I'd started washing my hands in the kitchen. I don't know what Audrey was doing. There sure was a lot of laundry to do. To save money and time on washing, Audrey would take people's hand-me-downs or take stuff from the Catholic mission down the street and just throw underwear out. And I picked up on that trick too. And you don't notice the accumulation right away. It kind of sneaks up on you. The dirty clothes in the bathroom were everywhere. On the floor, on the towel rack, hanging over the shower curtain, stacked on the side of the tub. I'd taken to shoving some of the bulkier stuff into the cabinets beneath the sink, but those were bulging out now. They wouldn't close right. Pants, socks, shirts, sweaters, bras, more pants. You get the idea. You know what laundry is. There's not a person on earth, not in LA or the rainforest or Stonehenge, who doesn't know what laundry is. Staring at it now, though, I got a bad feeling I'd never gotten before. Audrey had gotten to me. It was possible she was right. You heard things, you saw things, if you scrolled through the right parts of the internet. I shut off the light and closed the bathroom door. I never did that. We always left it open. But it felt better to have it closed now. I got back on the futon and I pulled my blanket up over my head and turned in the other direction so I wouldn't have to look down the hall where the bathroom was. I should have been thinking about rent and worrying that if Moped had to move in, he might wind up stabbing me again, but all I could think about was the stuff behind that door. Eventually, I fell back asleep, and I dreamed there was someone knocking, standing outside in the hallway, and I opened up, and Willem Dafoe came running down the hall. You know, the actor, and he was grinning, and he said, "Isn't this a wonderful day? They're letting us all be naked everywhere from now on. The bill has passed. The bill has passed." And in the dream, I was like, dude, I don't want to see that. Put something on. And he got real cold and serious, and he said to me, "You have nothing clean." And he had fangs. The text beep woke me up. It was Audrey. Her message was all in caps. It said, "Not one person has stopped for me." It was exactly 2:15 in the morning. So that meant I had to get in the car. Galleon Road started about 2 miles away and went all the way to Pecos Hills. I stood up to put my sneakers on. I'm real good at squishing my feet back in without having to retie them. And I saw that the bathroom light was on. My first thought was, okay, Audrey came back. But she wasn't on her mattress. So I called out to her. She didn't respond. I pushed the bathroom door open real slow. It was different, real different now. The laundry was gone. Every bit of it. The pants, the socks, the shirts, the sweaters, the bras. There was nothing on the sink or in the tub or balanced real careful on the towel rack. Nothing crammed below the sink. You could see the stuff in the bottom cabinet now. The spare light bulb and the broken remote control and the smoke detector. I said out loud, "She must have..." But I stopped. Must have what? Come back here in the dead of night and dragged the laundry out in 4 trips? I saw a vertical line of light beside the front door and I realized it was open, just a crack. In the hallway outside the apartment, just silence. Mrs. Blank in 1E and the creepy Montag triplets in 1C were all tucked away asleep, I guess. There was a single sock on the floor near the entrance to the building. I crept down the hallway to it, careful not to step on the spot on the wood that creaked so loud it sounded like the Titanic flipping over. The sock was one of the novelty ones Mom had sent us for our 40th birthday. It was blue and had Pac-Man on it. The front entrance was open about 2 feet. Against the rules, Phipps Properties would crucify you if you left that door open. I went back, locked the apartment, and headed out. I was frightened. Like I said, You read things on the internet sometimes about what could happen. We hadn't started the Cavalier in a couple of months, not since it failed inspection, but it did get going on the third try. It sounded like Bela Lugosi if he was 100 years old and trying to climb up a sliding board. The needle was a little bit below the E, but not too much. I pulled away from the curb beside the building and turned onto Bansha Avenue. Bansha led through a couple of miles of body shops and dive bars out to Woolsey. I thought about stopping for a soda refill at Marvelous Muses because it was only 39 cents, but I didn't want to take a chance detouring even a half mile, so low on gas. Turned out to be a moot point anyway. The Cavalier gave up the ghost about 50 yards before the turnoff. I don't know whether it was out of gas or it was the alternator again. Didn't matter. I cranked the wheel to the right and got the car into an empty parking lot beside me, a familiar one. The little square cement building had closed at midnight and the windows were dark. The sign on it said, Sparkling Cat Laundromat. I guess I should have found where I was ironic or even funny, but I didn't. I texted Audrey, told her to start walking back west. Maybe she'd only gotten a few miles. I sat there in the dark, waiting for an answer. It was creepy, the laundromat with no lights on. All those big, round mouths on the dryers, lined up in a row behind the glass. Sparkling Cat was the bane of my existence. Audrey's too. Half the machines always broken, never draining right. People overloading them all the time or wandering off and leaving their clothes. Your quarters getting spat out over and over again. Drug addicts asking you for money. Not enough push carts. Some variant of Judge Judy always on the TV, or if you're really lucky, one of the 50 Law and Order knockoffs from 10 years ago. And what was it all for? I ask you that. So we don't smell bad? Why don't we just all agree, mutually, to smell bad? Then we'd be free of this insanity forever. Audrey didn't text back for some reason. I tried calling her. No answer. 15 minutes. Very few other cars went by. A black dog with no collar wandered out from behind the building, not giving a damn about me, and trotted down the shoulder of the road. Never had to wring out a sock by hand in its life. I had one option left. I went around to the back of the car and popped the trunk. Candace Marie was in there, untouched for a year now. I'd felt so guilty about stealing her I'd kept her in the trunk, not knowing what to do. Audrey gave her a name just to make me feel even worse about the whole thing. I lugged her out and reattached her front wheel. Her tires were kind of soft, but she was usable. I never wanted to steal Candace Marie, but money was tight last year, real tight. I made $10 from acting in 2021. I was a zombie in a student film. It has 11 views on YouTube. Off down Galleon I rode, the first real exercise I'd gotten since swordmanship class. Woolsey's businesses petered out and the road went from 4 lanes down to 2. Then a cruddy residential part and then pretty much open land. Even a tree once in a while. It was pretty much the country. Zero traffic. The 2 or 3 times a car came up behind me, I zigged over to the other side. I don't trust anybody. I got about 3 miles and then 25 years of smoking caught up to me. I had to get off and push for a while. It was pretty out there, beside the fields, with the hills in the distance, and a full moon, and the sound of crickets. I saw someone lying on the side of the road up ahead. I let Candace Marie drop and I approached them. It was so dark I couldn't see much. Couldn't even read the mile markers. I went past one, those mysterious mile markers. Dad used to say they were really secret signals used by the Masons. It was Audrey. She was lying face up in the dirt, just off the shoulder where the grass started. She wasn't breathing. Her eyes looked off into nothing. They looked puffy and sick, and 2 shades lighter, as if their pigment had swum away in terror through her panicking blood. She had something wrapped around her neck, real tight, knotted. It was the sleeve of a sweatshirt. The first thing I did was try to untie it, but it was so hard to do. The knot was so tight. It had cut off her breathing entirely. The sweatshirt I recognized. It was a freebie we got from selling our plasma a couple of years back. It had the logo of the medical place on it, a happy clown. A blotch of dried chili had blacked out one of its corneas. In the end, I couldn't get the knot undone. I had to keep jostling Audrey's head around when I dug my nails into the fabric and kneaded it and clawed at it, and it was too horrible a thing to do. I stood up and looked around. No cars had passed in the last 5 minutes. About 50 yards up ahead, there was a tilted street lamp with a weak bulb. It threw this pool of yellow light down on the edge of the road. I saw an object at the far edge of that pool. It was a pair of Audrey's yellow sweatpants. As soon as I caught sight of it, it withdrew out of the light, fast, slithering into the darkness beyond without making even a whisper of a sound. I had a choice between going after it and trying one more time to revive Audrey. It doesn't matter what I did in the end, does it? And it doesn't matter that I didn't call the police just then. No, I didn't, because I thought maybe if the laundry saw me on the phone, I was defenseless after all, out there in the dark on Galleon Road. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to do some acting if I wanted to get out of there alive. And there was a different call I had to make. So I got back on the bike and I turned around and I started pedaling back the way I came. I tried to keep my mind perfectly blank. In about a quarter mile, there was a turnoff to a gravel road that sloped down to the Sickle City Fairgrounds. I took it and coasted through the dark down a gentle dirt slope, curving toward an enormous open grass tract. Vast space opened up all around, empty fields under the sky, so I could see in all directions and feel a little safer. It was week 2 of the Poisoned Popes Renaissance Fair. Audrey and I had both auditioned to be tavern riffraff. Nobody ever called us back. In the distance, there were huts and pop-up canvas storefronts, lightless, and past those a jousting track and a band shell. I bisected a row of 24 porta-johns. I stepped right into the middle of a field of phantoms, strung along row upon row of stout rope lines, and fluttering and flapping in the rising wind was a talkative sea of capes and corsets and chemises and coats and vests and doublets and breeches and tunics, costumes for an entire 15th century village. I stopped in my tracks, but then I thought there was nothing to fear from them, surely. They were drying out, newly appeased, harmless, for now. The wind made it all do a clumsy, tethered dance, each piece trying to touch and cling to the one beside it. I was praying I still had Anders' number in my phone. And there it was, right at the top of the list, like Providence. I dialed the number. Despite the ridiculous hour of the night, Anders picked up on the first ring, like he hadn't even been asleep. But that was Anders, of course. Intellectually brilliant and permanently stoned. I hadn't talked to him since he'd helped me memorize Jack Black's opening monologue from Kung Fu Panda, but he didn't care. Anders didn't care about anything but Australian exploitation movies, pot, and his beard. I asked him if he'd ever finished his documentary about laundry, the one he'd sold his chickens to finance. He told me over the phone that his camera battery had died, so he had to stop. But he'd been getting freaked out anyway about the things he was finding out. I needed to know if he'd actually found real evidence that laundry can become sentient. He told me that absolutely yes, he'd found evidence. He'd talked to many people. What do you expect? He said over the phone, probably sitting in the dark and just staring out his window over the neighborhood like he did. What do you expect from anything or anyone that is so scorned from the beginning of time, demonized like the plague across every culture, every historical epoch? It's despised, absorbing our vitriol and our stains beyond any level a human group would rationally accept before lashing out. Sometimes when it gathers, he said, its consciousness spreads from fabric to fabric. It becomes an organized swarm of anger that's no longer interested in solutions. It's interested in bloodshed. There were cases, the media didn't pay attention. 2 dead at a prison laundry facility in Olympia. A woman with dementia living alone in Biloxi who kept forgetting to do a wash until her own towels smothered her in the night. Towels, of course. What are we supposed to do? I asked Anders. And he said to me, do a load once in a while. How hard is it? But it is hard. I don't have a machine, and it gets too busy at the coin op, and there's bleach streaks in the washers, and if the change dispenser is down, there's some stupid, scammy pay card thing you have to load online if the website's up, and there's a lost dog flyer that's been there for 6 years. Oh, God, lugging the bag down the sidewalk day after day, and when you get there, the dryers are all full, and it's got to stop. Where's technology? We can print a potato, but I'm still spending half my life washing my clothes. Where's this all going with the laundry, the killing laundry? I asked Anders. He said he didn't know, but he wasn't taking any chances. Took a load down to Commander Clean's every 2 days. Every 2 days, a mile walk each way. 80% of life, he said, is knowing when you're vanquished. Do you agree? Yes. Yes. I hung up, and I pushed Candace Marie slowly back up the hill. It was hard. Once I was back on the road, I turned left and I began to pedal again. Twice, cop cars sped by me, sirens blaring. One headed toward the city, one away from it. When I got back to the Sparkling Cat, where the car was, I stopped to rest. A text suddenly popped up. It was from Anders. Lock the doors, he typed. Instead of riding home, where I thought the laundry might be waiting for me, I rode down lonely Jackfruit Avenue, everyone asleep in their cheap modular houses, then through Coatesdale and past lonely Sickle City Park. The park had always been a place I could go and think, a place it seemed like no one but me knew about. I took the little wooded bike trail in for the first time, and almost right away I saw lights through the trees. I knew what they were. There was nothing unusual or alarming about them. But when I saw what they were shining on now, I stopped. I held my breath, watching. After a time, I turned around very slowly. I pushed myself away, coasting, afraid that pedaling would make too loud a sound. Only when I got back onto Galleon did I understand what I had to do. The clerk at the 7-Eleven on Cannon Street barely noticed me come in. so performing my little theft was super easy. To cover it, I even bought myself a small Slurpee, all I could afford, grapefruit flavor. That was always Audrey's favorite. In the dark windows of the closed Sparkling Cat laundromat, which used to be open 24 hours before there were too many violent incidents there, I looked at my pallid reflection, outlined neatly by the sputtering light from the bulb over the front door. I unscrewed the lid of the little bottle of Tide and dipped my fingers into the cool, blue, wet murk. When I was finished what I needed to do, I got back on the bike and I returned to Sickle City Park. This time I was much, much bolder than the first. I parted the trees at the end of the bike trail that led me in, and there it was, the unnamed community amphitheater. It used to be where I would come and daydream about being an actor on stage or TV or maybe a video game. I even once rehearsed Faye Dunaway's coat hanger monologue from Mommy Dearest when there was no one around, which no one ever was. The amphitheater was just 20 stone rows curving around a grassy bowl. Didn't even have a backdrop. And the stage was just cracked cement. And nothing had ever been staged there. Sickle City was about as artistic as a book of Garfield cartoons. Now, the two lamplights flanking the stage area, the ones they'd had to install to keep addicts from shooting up in the park, shone down on a packed house for the first time. I could barely even see the stone bleachers. They were covered by dirty clothing of every conceivable kind, from every conceivable source. And not just clothing, but sheets, pillowcases, patio chair cushions, a sleeping bag or two, what looked like a car mat, even a Canadian flag with mud all over it. But mostly pants, socks, shirts, sweaters, bras, the soiled machine washables of the world. Even from 100 feet away, the smell was not great. And on the stage, the largest mound of quilts human eyes had ever seen looked out over the audience. It rose 12 feet high. Before I approached, I merely stood and listened, and I could sense the communication going back and forth. I could feel it in my fingertips and my knees somehow, the chatter and the debate and the instructions moving from weave to weave along thin lines of energy and sensation that we were not meant to know. I was witnessing, maybe even hearing, the beginning of it all, the gathering, not just in this city, but dozens or even hundreds of others. On this night when my sister would not be the only victim of their intended crusade. I walked forward. I was still afraid, oh yes. It could have killed me in seconds, but it didn't. Step by step, I descended from the top of the bowl down the grass steps toward the stage, not even looking left and right. I held my head high so as not to make it known how terrified I was. I had stripped to the waist. I stopped in front of the towering, moldy-smelling mound of quilts, which, if it had been clean, freshly laundered and ironed, would have been beautiful to behold instead of monstrous. The liquid detergent I had painted my face, my neck, my arms, and my entire torso with dripped onto the cement. I turned to the static audience. I raised my arms slowly in supplication, my palms outward, in peace. The wind rose, lifting the corners of pillowcases and rustling uniforms. Then I turned once more to face the quilt beast, gazing up at its peak, and I sank to my knees delicately, tiny rocks digging into my jeans. I leaned forward. I pressed a cheek against a soft spot in the fabric, cool and slightly damp, in order to leave a symbolic kiss of detergent there. A seahorse-shaped blood stain inches from my face seemed very old, stubborn, not the kind you can just blot and treat and wash away. Old and permanent, or maybe it was new, from this very night. I bent at the waist and clasped the grass peeking through the cement. I waited for the death blow I hoped would not come, for had I not shown myself to understand what was before me, identify with its anger, and present myself as not just a supplicant, but a willing and able aid?
O conqueror, let me wipe away this costume so you can see the stains I have always carried. Let me walk with you into the maze of two-lane blacktop. The wind fierce at our back. Washcloths and comforters and unpardonable humans alike. Slithering and tumbling and dancing. United for the battle between the only two true factions. The dirty and the clean.